What is going on, family? Welcome to another episode of the Good, Brave, and Heroic Podcast. I am here with my co-host, Joanna Munoz. My name is Eric Munoz Jr. Actually, I am a junior. And we want to welcome you to our podcast where we talk all things faith, family, marriage, kids, just all the topics that have to do with living the Christian life well in all the different capacities and personhoods that you are. You are a special part of this podcast, and we want to welcome you today. And I'm going to let Joanna say something because I'm all like, fwa, fwa, fwa. And we got to let her you could just smile at the camera.
Let's take a vote. Who had coffee and who did not?
Who had coffee? I can show you my coffee cup.
Twice.
Listen, I am super hyped for today's episode because it is a topic that Joanna and I have talked about many times. It is actually about how you can work under a bad boss, right? How do you navigate the difficulty that it is to work under a boss that is not aligning with your expectations or the way that you view things or the things that you want to accomplish at your job or whatever the case may be for you, especially on top of that, when you're a Christian and you want to honor God with the work that you put forth. Now, we've had the great privilege of working under good bosses and some bosses who we just didn't align with, right? Maybe they were good bosses in their own right, but we didn't align well with them. And so I feel like we have some insight into how you can navigate that. What are some tips that we've learned? We made plenty of mistakes. We talked about this before we started the episode. We made plenty of mistakes ourselves in how we did things, and I'm willing to share some of those things. And we'll mostly talk about past experiences because my current boss sucks so much I don't want to talk about him.
He is his boss.
I am my own boss. I was serious. Sometimes I suck as a boss to myself. The hardest person to lead is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's so like this is a probably too deep of a first talking point, but a lot and people will be like, nope, I don't want to listen to this. This is definitely too much. You could have brought this up later. It's too early. But a lot of times it's easy to point your finger at your boss. It's so easy to be like, yeah, you do this wrong and you do that wrong, and I don't like the way that you do this. And then all of a sudden, you're your own boss, or even better, you're a boss over other people. And all of a sudden, the sauce is a little not so
spicy.
tasty. Yeah, spicy is even better. It's
Or tasteless.
Ooh, nobody wants tasteless sauce. Who wants tasteless sauce? That ain't
even sauce. Why do you
sauce.
have it in there?
Right? Like, it's so funny how we say the sauce, and that is so anti the sauce, like tasteless sauce, but that's neither here nor there. So, yeah, we'll talk about some of our past experiences, and I've had some interesting jobs. What was your first job, by the way?
My first job was at the mall, and I worked for Echo, the clothing store. Before it was, I don't even know. Before it turned preppy, Marc Ecko, because they used to sell Echo, and then there was Marc Ecko.
There was glory days for Echo.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, like, I remember this really dope shirt that my friend Steve had growing up. It was this Wolverine shirt by Echo. Super dope. He loved Echo, by the way. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I never saw him at the store, so he didn't love it that much.
It was before you were working there. I think it was like in 8th grade when he was like rocking Echo like that.
Oh, yeah. By the time I was working there, people were not really wearing Echo.
Oh, yeah? It was on its way out.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't adapt. They didn't change.
No, they tried to adapt by then keep merging it to just using Marc Ecko, or at least that's what it seemed like. But it didn't take.
Yeah,
and it was really expensive.
In the comments if Echo is still
Is that still
alive
a thing?
and thriving. Imagine the CEO comments like, we're still here. Do you know what my first job was?
I feel like I know. McDonald's.
No.
And then
That's
my other guess is
second
wrong.
job. My first, I do say McDonald's is my first job sometimes because my first job was so bad. I don't even consider it my first job, but
Sure.
technically it was my first job. So my first job was I worked one day at a supermarket on Elizabeth Avenue
I didn't know this.
as a bagger.
Okay.
It was under the table. You don't even get a paycheck. You know what that means, right? That's where all the homies work at. Let's just name it homies. All of our homies, right? That's where they work at. And I was I think I might have been underage, if I'm not mistaken, or I was just at it, and I was just looking.
How old
for a
are
job.
you?
I don't remember.
You're
Probably like
7?
16, 17,
That's not
maybe
underage.
15. I think like I was either right below the border or on it. Get it, border.
Stop. I thought it. I
Get
thought it.
border.
I thought
Anyway, so I worked there one day, and you got paid in the tips that they left you, which was
it.
always
Which was never.
the extra coins that they had from paying in cash because it's
Mhm.
Elizabeth Avenue. They paid in cash. And I worked there one day, and now looking back, I realized that my anxiety was through the roof. Back then, I just thought, yo, this is not for me. But I was freaking out the whole time. Like, I don't know what it was. The hustle and bustle. Of
It's
people.
fast.
Yeah, it's fast. And I did a fine job. It's just, it was too much for me. And so the
Did
next
you
day-
Did you like quit, or did you just never come back?
You think I was responsible at 15 years old? Of course I didn't come back the next day. And they did not care. They did not care.
How do you know?
Because they probably knew. They were like, this 15-year-old kid, he ain't gonna last. I mean, it was Hector who got me that job.
Hmm. Did he work?
I think he
There
did it. Yeah, he did it too. And I think it was because he was underage, if I'm not mistaken.
I need to
Hector was
ask
always-
Hector.
Hector was always the hookup with jobs. He got me into McDonald's too.
That's so funny.
I lasted in McDonald's for a long time though. I lasted so long in McDonald's, this is besides the point, but the boss, like the boss, the main guy, he said, I heard so many of your friends that I think I'm going to get into heaven. We might as well start a church, a McDonald's church, because he knew that we were all Christian. So, yeah, he did hire a lot of my friends, though. We did have a lot of people working there. I have some funny stories from McDonald's, but let's move on. So, how was your boss at Echo?
I had several managers. Big range in personalities. Some were really chill, laid back, like, just don't mess around, do your job, clock in, clock out, do it well. And that's it. Really chill. I had another manager who was like, who kind of made you tense. This manager was a little bit, it was like he tried to be chill and laid back, but it was not. It was the opposite, was just seeping out. And the other manager, I'm only remembering 3. Now I'm wondering if there were more. I'm not sure. The other manager was he had the personality of a manager who was like, who really cared about like getting things done well and stuff. And was a little like, he also tried to be chill, but he clearly was like, things need to be a certain way.
Did he have like a point, or was he overdoing it?
I don't really know. You don't
remember?
I don't really remember. I just remember that was my first job, and I remember working there and just thinking, I don't know what my expectations were, but I've always been the type, like, just, I need to know what needs to be done, what's expected of me, and I want to excel at that.
Right.
So if it meant I was folding a bunch of shirts, they all had to be perfectly folded and aligned. And like one couldn't be bigger or smaller than the other when I stacked them. customer service, I was trying to excel. So whatever I was given, I was trying to excel at.
Right.
I tried not to complain, but I was like 17 and working in retail.
Yeah. Working in retail is tough. I refuse to work at the mall.
Yeah. Some people would come in and if anything, I think the customers were a lot harder to deal with than my bosses.
Right.
Because they would come in and treat it like their house.
Mm-hmm.
Like how you see a lot on TV, people going on a date, they're trying to choose an outfit and they can't find one because they're nervous. So all the outfits are just flown around.
That's how the customers were.
That's exactly how it was in the changing room, in the store. And it was like,
you see, what's interesting is that the only retail I worked was a bookstore, and it was exactly the same. Like, you had sections for the books. Now, sections, I guess, are not as clear as piles of the same pieces of clothing. But people would take like a book there was a section called Christian Living, which is a bad example because that was like our miscellaneous section. Whenever we didn't know where to put something, we just put it there. But
that's funny.
For the sake of our example, there was a Christian Living section, which is all things about living the Christian life well, right? Then there was like a spiritual warfare section. And people would take the books and they would just throw it into like spiritual warfare or famous authors or prayer. Like you would find books everywhere all the time. And then when you had to do inventory or you had to find a book for someone, you couldn't ever find it. And so it was the worst, but it's interesting that you say that the customers were worse than the bosses, which to me is very telling because it means that your bosses weren't that bad. Because as stressful as customers can be, the only thing that really, really, really can stress you out, I think, about a job is when you aren't aligning well with your boss, or in other words, you think you have a bad boss.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes the problem is you. Sometimes it could be your boss. You really have to do some soul searching to be able to find that. But work can be extremely stressful. I was about to say sexual.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, you gotta go.
Some jobs can be, like
some jobs are like that.
Wilded, so, but I just need to get that out because that was hilarious. I was like, why did sexual come to my mind? Anyway, your job can be really stressful when you have bad clients, when you have bad days, whatever. But what stretches bad days into bad weeks and bad months and bad years, if you're really unlucky, is a bad boss.
Yeah.
When your leader is out there tripping, that's like a heavy weight, which is why probably I think this won when we did a poll. Which episode should we do next? I didn't think that this one was gonna win.
I didn't think so either, and I'm like, so you guys want us to just
I thought it would
air out
last,
stuff?
But apparently it seems like there's a lot of people who are maybe dealing with the boss that they don't align. Either at the low end, they don't align well with them, and on the high end, maybe their boss isn't so good. And I don't know. Would you agree that can be extremely stressful and lead to long stretches of stress?
Yeah, it adds to when you have an environment that either, for whatever reasons, the environment is a negative environment where you can't do your job and you are genuinely trying to do your job and do it well, where the environment is toxic. I know that's like a trendy word now, but it's truly toxic, where the environment is, it's just like, ugh, where it just isn't ideal for there to be collaboration, for you to meet your goals or what's expected of you. That That's really hard to sit through every single day. And it's not like you can, it's so stressful that it's not like you clock in and clock out and the stress ends, because you're trying for the life of you to recover from not just the job, but recover from the added stress of it, because it starts to take a mental load on you. And your mind is on overdrive because you have all these emotions, these extra emotions, and you're thinking there's a whole other layer to it.
You're taking it home.
And so you're taking it home, you're thinking about it outside of work hours, you're trying to find solutions, or you have to vent it. It's exhausting. And then it takes that physical toll on you when you're carrying it all the time and you can't find solutions.
And the worst part is that you're not in a position of power to create real change.
Yeah. And then you've got the other side of it where it's like, oh, well, that's why there are policies in place. But that gets tricky too.
Yeah.
Even though there are policies in place, and there are also policies in place, there are policies in place to protect you if you need to speak up. There are policies in place for you to speak up, but it always ends up biting you in the butt. Yeah, it seems like.
A lot of HR departments go right back to the boss and tell them exactly what you said.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just kind of how it goes. And then you're singled out. And so it's really muddy. It's really messy. And sometimes there are some jobs where if you don't become a part of the clique, then you're on the outside, and then that gets messy and you're treated differently in the workplace. And there are a lot of employees or even bosses who toe the line a lot. So you can't really say anything, but you know that things aren't being done right. And that's super stressful, because it's like, if you care about your job, you want to do it well. And so you try to avoid or maybe tame the many fires. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, at least this is still okay. This is still good. The ship is still going. But then on the other end, it's like, well, then that boss is never going to be held accountable.
Right.
And I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Because I had that. I had an abusive boss. And I ended up being the everything. And unfortunately, I didn't learn it until after the fact, because I think my heart was just so in it. Right. That I wanted to do, there were families involved. So I wanted to do right by them, that I allowed it to burn me. Yeah. And it burned me out. And
Right, because in all of your jobs outside of Echo, you're serving people.
Yeah.
And when you're serving people, the lines get muddy.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll let things go because I have to let this go, because if I burn a bridge or if I cause chaos here, now I can't serve these families or these.
Or it's going to affect them.
And it starts to affect them. Yeah. So you become the sacrificial lamb.
Yep.
And that's not fair. That's not fair to you, but sometimes it happens, and it really, really sucks. And, I'm sure that there are people listening that have similar feelings. Like, what were some of the feelings you were wrestling through during that time?
I had conflicting feelings. I was submitting to God a whole lot. I felt really frustrated. I felt conviction. I felt anger. I felt desperation. I felt injustice. I felt unprotected. I felt pressured. There were a lot of moments where, and I, for those of you that know me, I don't really care about titles and I don't care about recognition. But when it goes on for like 5 years and you see the abusive boss taking all of the credit for things that they did nothing for, or almost nothing, it's like,
stressful.
It's stressful because you know that it's not only does it look good on them, but that it's like you can add that to your resume, but what's being added to mine?
Yeah.
How is that going to help me succeed further in the business or whatever it is. How's that going to help me build? You're not helping me build. You're being selfish. So it was very, very stressful, especially seeing that and seeing that I wasn't getting not just compensated with recognition, but compensated for it's my livelihood. Like I wasn't getting compensated for it because my boss was being selfish. So that was difficult. And granted, even though that wasn't happening, I wasn't getting recognition. I always did believe that God was always going to have my back, and that God was going to compensate me, and He was going to find a way to, bring me up to, like lift me up, and I was always going to be highly favored if I continued submitting to God. Mm-hmm. So I continued to sacrifice a whole lot, and I had to be very wise and discerning. Even though I prayed for that and I tried to be those things, it was really hard, and I still fell in a lot of ways. But I tried submitting to God as much as I could to get through it, and just trusted that God would do His thing, and He did. He did. In some ways, I didn't need to be seen to get recognition or to be elevated in any ways. Just with people interacting with me, I think my character showed.
Right.
And so then, I did eventually get some kind of opportunity to move forward, but it took a while.
Yeah, and that's one of the most difficult parts of navigating this in the Christian walk. It's balancing your emotions about the situation and towards your boss, balancing how you personally need to grow, right? So what are your contributions to the situation, if there are any, which usually there are, at least there is something, right? Whether you're aware of it or not. So balancing that, your own personal growth, and then also at the same time balancing the whole. How much here do I need to sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. How much here do I need to just submit to my leadership, or bear this cross, for lack of a better way of saying it? And when do I need to stand up for myself, right? Because that was always my struggle. I always struggled with knowing, when do I stand up for myself? When do I speak up? How do I speak up, right? And when I started to learn that, as most people do, I overcorrected, right? I remember the season in my life where this started to happen. I would get into arguments with my boss out loud in front of coworkers. And while I'm not sure that every single one of those, depending on how it happened, what happened, and the circumstances, I'm not sure that I was wrong for every single one of those. I know that there are some that I did wrong because I apologized for them. You know what I'm saying? And I would send out a text to everybody that was in the room, or say it in front of everybody at the next meeting if we had one or whatever, because I know that I did wrong. And so it makes me think about, we're going to talk about some of the different things that you can do to navigate all of that. But also, I want to touch on real quick about what expectations we have from our bosses. What do we want to see in bosses? Because there was a season when I was a boss where I knew I wasn't doing my best. Actually, I think I was doing a pretty bad job. And in hindsight, a lot of my staff was really frustrated with me during this season. And looking back, the expectation that they had of me was very legitimate, and I wasn't meeting it. And the expectation was for me to carry my own weight. There was a season where I think I was experiencing anxiety, and towards the end of this job specifically, I wasn't happy. I was allowing it to color who I was as a person. I wasn't as excited to be at work every day. So I wasn't giving my best. There were only certain aspects of the job that I enjoyed, and those were the only ones I participated in. And on other days, I still gave them leadership and direction. I still held staff meetings. I still was there when they needed me. I did a lot of the stuff that was not even bare minimum. It went beyond, right? But they were still things that I could do naturally. But the things that I would fight against before, where sometimes I hide, sometimes I will take a maybe lazier approach, right? And not be as present because I'm in my own head, right? That's a weakness that I have as a person. I let that take over. And during that season, I wasn't present for my staff. What they needed was not really cool, inspirational speeches at staff meetings, which I could do right now if I had a staff in front of me, right? I could do that. Boom. Like maybe it'll take me a little bit to get my footing, but eventually I'll just kick into a mode, right? Because it comes naturally to me speaking because I've done it for so long. But they didn't need that. They needed somebody to be present. They needed somebody to model how to do the job. They needed me to be there, maybe not to be there for them, but to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And because I wasn't, they felt it. So what did they do? They complained. Not to me, to each other. And then instead of fixing it, I got mad at them and started to try to correct it in the ways that were easier for me, rather than doing what they really needed and just ignoring that. And I think that a lot of bosses, I think this will be insightful for a lot of people. A lot of bosses that you feel are bad bosses are fighting their own demons.
Yeah.
They're fighting their own demons. They're fighting their own situation. They're discouraged. Maybe they have a bad boss. They have bad days, bad weeks, bad months, bad years. They have situations at home that you know nothing about. You don't know how to do their job, even though you feel like you do. And if you got into it, you might do a better job than them. You might not, right? And they have situations that they're going through. Now, I'm not saying, granted, I'm not saying
that it justifies. Yeah.
Because if anybody is going to complain about leaders being in the wrong position, it's me, right? I talk about that all the time. How there's so many supervisors, so many managers, so many leaders, people in positions that they don't got no business being in, because I'm passionate about leadership. I'm passionate about people being in positions that deserve to be there, not because they have 15 years over the next guy who's more qualified or the next girl who's more qualified, not because they have a penis in their pants and the other one has a vagina, that all of a sudden they're the best person for the position. Sorry, that is not a qualification. Not because their best friends are golf buddies with the main manager above, and all of a sudden they make a new position leading all of these other people, and boom, this is your new manager. It just so happens that they're my best friend. No. Right? None of that is a qualification for leadership.
It's tasting a little spicy.
Tasting a little spicy. Leadership is about being able to lead people. It's a commitment that you make to be invested in people's lives, in their personal growth, in your own growth, pushing yourself, creating principles for you to lead your team by and living by them, taking care of your people, showing them and giving them a vision to run with, and then running in front of them so that they look forward and see you running as hard as you possibly can and become inspired themselves to do the same. That's what leadership is. And people take leadership positions for what? For the money, for the title. Money and the title. Money and power, baby. That's what it's about. People take it because of money and power, right? And there's a lot of people who are much more qualified for these positions many times who aren't taking it because they don't feel qualified. Mm-hmm. And many times a person that is more humble is a great indication of them actually being qualified. Yeah. And so, yeah, we have all these expectations on our bosses. We have these expectations on who we want our leaders to be. And it's frustrating when they don't meet those expectations. So then the question then becomes, what do you do? How do you navigate that?
So I think for me, and it doesn't always work, but I feel like there are just some things that you just have to do, whether they work or not. There are just things that you have to do. I have conversations. I have very real conversations. You have to get very comfortable with confrontation and not dance around the subject. It's, if you want change, you're going to have to do something different. If you want to see a change in your leader, in your environment, in your job, your leader might not know.
They might not.
They might not know.
They might not.
And if they do, then that's on them. But it's your job. I think it's a part of your job to express and to advocate for yourself and to have those difficult conversations with your boss. And you don't have to do it in a staff meeting and in front of everyone. You could call on your boss to do it on the side, privately.
Yeah, just to say something to that specifically, because that's such a great point. Something that I learned from our former pastor, Pastor Lipe. He said, we want to have safe conversations. You can have a conversation with me at any point, at any time. Well, not any point, any time, but I'm willing to have a conversation about something that needs to be changed. But the key is safe places, safe people, safe times. That's a really great tip for people to take. Do not let your frustration build to a point where now you're airing things out during a staff meeting.
Yeah.
You have a responsibility, like I said earlier that I did, right? You have a responsibility to speak up. And many times that's the only tool that you have, speaking up. It's so key how you do it. Safe times, right? Is it the time for it? Or is that person trying to put together a staff meeting for the whole staff and they're running crazy? Safe people, who's around, whose ears are listening?
What are they going to do with that information?
What are they going to do with that information? Safe places. Is this a place where it feels safe?
Is it appropriate?
Right? Or are you in public? Are you in a common area? Now that person's going to have their guard up. So you want to have a conversation when all three of those things are present, and you're going to have a much better outcome. One thing I would add to that also is that if you want to make the possibility of your words being more likely to be heard by that person, by your boss, you need to make sure that you're above reproach.
And if you're not, you have to own up to your stuff.
That's even more powerful.
You have to own up.
Right? Because I've been in situations like that before. I've been like, hey, listen, I know that I did this, and that. And what you're doing is you're breaking down the walls because you're willing to show how you're being vulnerable.
Yeah.
You're saying, I know that I did this, I did that, I did this. And an immature person is going to be like, yeah, you did do that. So I don't know why you're coming and talk to me. But you still got to have the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a place for vulnerability in the workplace and an appropriate amount. And that's tricky to navigate too. But I have found that I've had some bosses too, where they're so disconnected as a person from the job that we don't know anything about the person. We don't know what they stand for. We don't know their opinions, opinions and ideas. We don't know what they stand for. And for the job, it's kind of important for us to know that, so that we know how to collaborate and how to move things forward. And I think there are ways to express that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And to add on to what you were saying, safe people, safe places, safe times, it has to be for both. Because I remember being in many situations where I had a lot of private conversations, because it's not going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conversations. It's going to take several conversations, depending on how bad the situation is, and if you start building that kind of relationship with your boss. I remember eventually these private conversations were either starting to burn me or I no longer felt safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I needed to, if it was like a conversation that we have had several times about the same thing over and over,
Right.
and I'm not really getting anything back from you, and I feel like as a boss, you're closing me out and you're not hearing me, then eventually I am going to bring it up at a staff meeting because this has become a work environment situation.
Right.
It's not a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the key is always, as emotional as you might feel about the situation, it's key to always check your tone, check your intentions, check your words, as every right you have to say what you want. You can't be petty.
Yeah.
You just can't
You
be
have to
petty.
ask yourself what you want. 'Cause
Yeah.
if you want
What's the goal?
a better resolution, then being petty is not going to get get you what you want.
Yeah.
All it's going to get you is that small piece of satisfaction that you got at taking a jab at your boss.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Nothing.
Yeah. If you're going to be petty, just do it privately.
Yeah.
I
that's funny. Another thing to add to what you're saying is that you were in an abusive situation, right? And so this is a little tip that I want to give to everybody that's listening. Look up your recording consent laws
Mm-hmm.
for your state. We're from New Jersey, and New Jersey is a one party consent state, which means that only one party needs to consent to recording the conversation, and that includes you. So it's literally like I consent to the recording of this conversation. Boop. Like, you know what I'm saying? So interesting the way that the law works. There are some states where it's two-party consent. You need to say, hey, are you okay with me recording this conversation for whatever purposes?
Mm-hmm.
But if your state is a one-party consent state, and you need to protect yourself, right? Because if you're in an abusive situation with your boss, it is very important for you to document the conversations that you have. Because if things escalate, if they become frustrated at you and they want to get rid of you,
Mm-hmm.
now you have documentation. And if you need to follow up legally, or if you just need to cover yourself with the ones who are higher up than your boss, then you have that.
Yeah.
Right. And you can record dates and conversations, but you can also just record, or you could do both, record the conversation.
I always say email. Even if you have a phone conversation.
Yes, that's a great tip.
Even if you have a phone conversation, always follow up with an email about the conversation you just had. Because there's a lot of he said, she said, and it gets messy. And that's a great way to keep it professional and just documented. It's written. So unfortunately, if you have to get there, that's what you have to do.
It sucks if you have to, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the confrontation piece that you were saying earlier. You have to be willing to, what's not the word, not confrontation. It is confrontation.
That's
like
what I
confrontation.
Yeah.
You do need to be able to get there. You don't need to be gossiping about it.
Yeah.
You don't need to be talking to other people at your work about it and complaining about your boss to those other people. That's not what God
you
has
need
called
to
you
be a
do.
part of the solution. You need to be a problem solver. Your God calls us to be peacemakers, and sometimes peacemaking means you shake things up a bit for there to eventually be peace.
Expand on that.
So sometimes it means having those confrontational conversations where it gets really uncomfortable, where it gets really loud, not like in volume loud, but it gets loud. Like I remember having. Another thing is you need to have very clear parameters and respect your job description too, of course. And you need to draw those boundaries very clearly, especially when your boss is trying to abuse that. And when you do that and you're giving your boss pushback, it can get a little messy. I remember doing that with one of my bosses, the one that was abusive. And because I was no longer like in his clique, he was taking it very personally. And so he would find ways to take things out on me, to humiliate me. And not here. Not here. So Always kept it professional, but not here. So I had to find ways to, be clever in, okay, God, this is really like, it's messing with me. I know but it's messing with me. So I knew that if he was publicly going to humiliate me, I needed to publicly also, as a woman in the position that I was in, it was already hard. And so I knew that I needed to also publicly set those boundaries and set that line. Like, you cannot cross this line. I don't care what title you hold or what titles you think you hold over me, but this is the professional line that you cannot cross.
Right.
And so in doing that and confronting this boss in front of people, that's loud.
Yeah, it is very loud.
And it's tense. Mm-hmm. And it's silent. And it's awkward. And it's weird. But you're not about to disrupt. I'm not going to allow you to disrupt maybe the calling in that moment that God has called me to, whatever that was. I'm not going to allow you to just have this authority over me that you do not have the right to. And so peacemaking sometimes is a little messy like that and loud and confrontational before the peace actually comes.
Right.
So that's what I meant by that.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if you were going to continue or say what it was.
Oh, that's
yeah.
Yeah. So, it's just, I think that aside from all of the, like the tips of having the right vocabulary, remaining professional, as much as you want to be petty, bite your tongue, recording the conversation. Then there's as a Christian, because we all know that there's also a spiritual component to this. Why do you have me here, God?
Right.
What
God has
what do I do
here
here?
For a reason.
And if I am done with what I'm supposed to be doing, how do I go? Right. How do I transition out? Where do you want me to transition out to? Because you have to also know, like, you're not Jesus. You're not there to fix it all. Mm-hmm. So you have to know when it's your time to go. And if it's not your time to go and you have to still endure, all right, God, how do I do it? Give me the tools.
Yeah, because that is the final tip.
Yeah.
The final tip is it might be time to go. Mm-hmm. And I know I went through that, right? There's elements of it that I have wondered if I could have done it better, because at this one job there was this one job where I reached the point where I was in such bad contention with my bosses. It wasn't my boss, it was my bosses. At that point, it was like, I don't know if they couldn't fire me, but if I would have kept going in the way that I was going, they probably would have tried. But I made the decision for them. And it was because I came home, we had a conversation, and you told me it was time. I told you that I felt it was time, that I felt like God told me, or God put in my heart that it was time. And you said, yeah, it's time, because this is affecting who you are. And the reason why I ended up leaving was because I was being told to break state regulations concerning my job. And that was like the final straw. There was a whole lot that led up to that, but that was the final straw. And, maybe they see it differently. Maybe they'll say that they weren't asking me to do that, but that's what I felt, right? Because I want to give the what's the word? The
benefit of the doubt.
Benefit of the doubt, right? Her face.
Because I know what happened.
I always try to give the benefit of the doubt to people, because
I'm sorry, but that situation was not black and white. The situation was black and white. There was no gray area.
I always try to assume that people have positive intent. And so the thing that I've had to wrestle with was, how could I have balanced leaving well without having to burn bridges, and the magnitude of what was happening? because I was put in a really difficult position. And I know that I have like peers who felt, they haven't told me this, but I know they felt like I could have handled it better because I literally gave 1 day's notice. But
Mad.
I also feel like the whole I don't want to go on a rant. Don't let me go on a rant. But I feel like the whole concept of like 2 weeks notice and a lot of the things that we have embedded in our American culture are almost idols that have elevated themselves over treating people well. Give 2 weeks notice to a corporation that will replace you 2 days after you die and not even say anything about it is weird. That's weird. Now, not every place is not going to say anything about it. And I'm not saying that my previous job was like that. I'm just saying in general, right? There are general principles that we have about work and the workplace and our bosses, and even as Christians, that we're told submit in churches and in at work. Submit to your leadership. But what do you do when your leadership is abusing you? What do you do when your leadership is putting you in a position where your faith is compromised? Oh, that one's easy, right? That one's easy, especially for the churchy Christians. But what if it's in the church? What if you work for the church? What if your boss is racist and is doing all these microaggressions towards you as a Latino or Black person or other marginalized people group? What do you do? Do you submit?
Flip the tables. Peacemaking.
And I'm not saying that we have all the answers. I'm saying that these are things that we've had to wrestle with. And in wrestling with them, a lot of times in wrestling, you get hurt. Wrestling is not a clear and clean act. You're gonna hurt others, and sometimes you're gonna hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. Because you're putting yourself in positions that are weird for you and are hard to navigate. That's why I think they use the word wrestling. But the key is, are you wrestling with it? And I had to wrestle with all of these different things to be able to arrive to the point, well, maybe there's some things I could have done here better. Maybe this was right because this was black and white. And then carrying that into my future and trying my best afterward. So even if you feel like you didn't do a good job with navigating a difficult situation at a previous job, maybe you can do your best to navigate it well in your future job or in your current job and be able to honor God with the way that you work now.
Yeah. I think that's always been a key for me is how do I honor God? Because at the end, it's not about pleasing or honoring your boss. It's about honoring God and the position he's given you within that job. So if he's still calling you to that, how do I function in this role and still honor God? And sometimes it feels impossible and it seems impossible. Sometimes your hands are just really tied. So I get that. I think that it's necessary to just keep going to God for not just getting the tools to keep going day by day and trying to figure out how to do it, but also to recharge. Yeah. Because you get exhausted from it all. You have to recharge. And then I'm going to dare to say something. When you have conversations or you're going into a staff meeting, I'm going to dare you to not walk into that conversation or meeting already shut down.
Oh my goodness.
Because so you know that they're just going to say the same thing over and over. They're not going to this. They're not going to that. They're going to just do this. They're going to just do that. And I know I've done it. I'm like, my expectations are low. So let's just get this over with. I dare you to lean in, really listen. There might be something in there. You don't have to take everything that they're saying, but there might be something in there that you can hold on to, maybe learn from, maybe come back to, maybe use. You just never know.
Maybe your boss really just needs one person who isn't shut down during the meeting.
Yeah,
They might just
maybe.
need that. And I want to add another dare, since you just gave one, um, and it's in non-abusive situations, right? Maybe you're in situations where it's not an abuse. Your boss isn't abusing you. I want to dare you to just serve them well. Serve them as well as you can. Uh, Try to go above and beyond to help them and to create a relationship with them. And you might see that their ear might bend to you. And mix that with having the hard conversations, and maybe you can become an excellent asset towards helping them to grow the company or the organization or the nonprofit, as long as that's in their heart. And if they don't care, that is abuse, right? That is abusive. It's an abuse of their power, abuse of their position. Then you do your best to serve well to the people that you serve or to the mission of the company. I think in that way we honor Jesus.
Yeah, I think God is all about serving people. So I would just take it up with God. Like, how do I serve this person with what I have? And listen, and through prayer, sometimes I'm like, God, I can't do this. I've legit just asked God, like, either take me out or take someone out. Take me out or take the problems out.
Right.
And I've seen God take people out left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well then, God, all right, I guess you still have something for me here. I'm just saying, keep the situation in prayer, because sometimes it's just really not up to what you can and can't do within your job description. Sometimes it's just within the description of you as a child of God.
Yeah.
And you need to function in that. And sometimes, honestly, like Eric said, people have their own worlds, fighting their own demons, and sometimes they come together and party with each other when you're in the same workplace. So maybe you need to be there not to fight toe to toe with your boss or with your coworker or whoever it is and complain and liven up the party with your complaints, which are praise on the other end, and not toward God. Maybe what you're being called to do is get behind the scenes and get in the enemy's face through prayer.
Yeah.
And disrupt what's happening, and disrupt the bondage that's happening, disrupt the harassment happening in the workplace, disrupt the harassment happening in each of those people's lives. That's the kind of authority that we have. And maybe that's all you need to be functioning in. Maybe you need to be laying low and trying to do your job as best as you can, but you're on your knees and you are praying over these people. You are praying over this boss, because something's going to give.
Yeah.
So either they go, or so God will do something.
Yeah.
He will do something. And maybe you're planting something there that maybe you won't get to see immediately, but maybe that is your job.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the best especially when you feel like your hands are tied, that's probably the best way of handling an impossible situation like that.
Yeah. And a great episode for you guys to watch in light of what she just said would be our one on daily spiritual warfare. I think that would be a tremendous asset to navigating your daily work and having to engage in spiritual warfare on a daily basis at your job. And so we're going to end it here because we have to go home to our babies. So we want to thank you for watching today. We hope that there was something that you were able to take away, whether it's being able to do your best to represent Christ well, whether it's the need to speak up and to be that voice in the wilderness, or it's the need for you to get into spiritual warfare and get into doing some daily tasks that are more on the spiritual side, or not contributing to that demonic activity. That was really good. I hope people stayed to the end and heard that, because that was really, really wow. So yeah, Thank you guys so much for being here. We hope you had an amazing time with this podcast. And we hope that you'll hit the subscribe button, the like button, the comment button, all the buttons. Press, what is it, babe?
All the things. Do
Press
all the
buttons.
things.
Press, do all the things. We will see you guys again next week. Take it easy. Peace.